moment, and that's why I find it. I think a lot of maybe non-Muslim people might find it a bit cold when people don't shake hands or even like hugging, because I think there's like people who like physical contact, and I think that a lot of non-Islamic people might feel a bit maybe a bit cold from someone who doesn't want to shake hands or hug them. Even same with like the whole thing of a woman like covering herself. I think a lot of non-Islamic women might take that as a bit
Would you agree with me that Chinese and Indian people make up most of the population on the planet? Yeah, because they've got two of the biggest populations. And Indians, would you agree that? Oh, you need it, yeah? Would you say that Indians primarily follow Hinduism?
Yeah, I mean, but even Hinduism isn't really a real thing, is it?
No, we'll come to that. And would you say that predominantly Chinese follow Buddhism?
I mean, it's funny because these words like Hinduism, Buddhism, even Islam,
in terms of our understanding,
they've sort of been corrupted, because it's like, I mean, look, I want to be very careful as well, because I'm not a Hindu and I don't want to misrepresent anything to Hinduism, but I will say that in advance. But I know that regarding these religions, it's as if they've been given these names almost by like somebody else, because it's like what happened was people would kind of follow the religions of their ancestors.
That's fine. We'll come to this, but let's stick with the point, yeah, which is, would you say in China they follow Buddhism and in India they follow Hinduism?
Yeah, they follow these
typically.
schools of thought, yes.
Yeah. In Buddhism, they don't shake hands, they bow. In Hinduism, they don't shake hands, they join the hands and then they bow. So that makes up majority of the population of the planet. If you now include 1.8 billion Muslims who believe shaking hands is disrespectful because you are now invading the person's private space. Now think about this now. The only people that have told you that shaking of the hands, nay, even hugging, even the African tribes, if you meet them and you go for a hug, they will deem that to be extremely disrespectful. Now, who has convinced us that shaking of the hands and hugging is the normal thing to do? It's the Europeans. Again, it comes to this whole European-centric, Eurocentric view that this is our way of determining what is right or wrong by what the quote-unquote white man does.
Maybe it's just that different cultures have different ways of expressing endearment. Because the French, for example, like to kiss on the cheek. I think that's quite sweet. And maybe it's just that different cultures, the way in which people greet each other, different. Because, like, for example, different cultures would have certain temperaments, and it's like a culture where people are very like, I don't know, very tactile. Like that's part of the culture. Like I know Latin America, for example, they're a lot more tactile and stuff, whereas I think Western Europe is a bit colder. People are not maybe as tactile. I know there's a stereotype for Germans. I'm not really that well traveled.
Yeah. That's fine. I mean, it's good you've acknowledged that, because Zarina, when we look at where the information is coming from, that's when we realize, oh damn, like
the world is different everywhere.
Exactly. And Eurocentric view is something that does need to be identified.
Yes, I agree.
And does need to be challenged in moments like this, because especially if you're going to another country and you're saying, oh, they're doing this, that's wrong. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because it's like, for example, with Christianity, with the Catholics, when they went to like certain parts of the world to conquer, they said, oh, your worldview is savagery, and they said you're savages, not savages. And it's interesting, isn't it, how people would come to other cultures and say, your worldview is savagery, like you've got these tribes where women dance around naked, and it's not savagery. Like me saying, oh, you're not shaking my hand is rude, but it's like, well, actually, maybe it's not rude, maybe that's just his way of life. And maybe in order for people to be more respectful of different cultures, we need to actually see that like it's not necessarily savagery or rude or idolatrous, it's that the world is different. And that's why globalism is so dangerous, because they want to sort of destroy people's cultures and have everybody have one world thing, rather than saying, no, this culture is different, this culture is different. But I will say, just if it's okay to say on that, I do truly believe that cross-culturally, one universal thing regarding the world, I think we can all agree on this, and having said this in the park, men and women are different. I do think that regardless of where you go in the world, regardless of your culture, most of the world would agree that men are men, women are women,
Yeah.
and there's no such thing as non-binary. That's really the crux of my message, and I actually think that that is what is really, really, really destroying the West, is the people have forgotten that men and women are different.
That's I would undercut that with one other thing.
Sure.
I would undercut that with where has this thought come from?
Feminism and Marxism.
And where has that come from?
Marxism.
It's come from liberalism, which has
No,
come
actually, it's come from, because Marxism is very different from liberalism.
liberalism with a small L, philosophical liberalism.
Because classical liberals are also very against feminism.
You're looking at liberalism with a capital L, which is in terms of politics. I'm saying small L, i.e. philosophical liberalism, which is one aspect of which is the splitting of church and state. Yeah, in it, like separating religion and going by and like human beings, what we decide. That's what we decide
That
is
wasn't
reigning as
necessarily
well.
a bad thing, because I think a lot of those liberals were actually challenging a lot of the repression.
It
of the
was
church.
bad. Shall I tell you
There
why?
was a lot of repression of the church and stuff, so I think they were actually just challenging.
Repression of the church doesn't now mean that you split it completely.
Because the church was sort of abusing their authority, so I think
Yeah.
those kind of liberals were just trying to gain back power for the people. Just
But then when the church was, when that issue was solved, surely should have rejoined afterwards, isn't it? Because once the problem's been solved, then you revert back to what worked, isn't it?
I mean, the problem sometimes with these organized religious institutions is that a lot of them would kind of use religion as a way to abuse their power. And I think ultimately, if we're going to move forward and have a more godly world, which I think both you and I genuinely want, I think a lot of people want, is actually starting to see how religion or following in the path to the divine can be used as a way to actually bring people together, rather than as a way to conquer and divide people and destroy other people's cultures and faiths. I think that was the biggest problem, especially with the Catholic Church.
It's the same with the rise of feminism as well. That one of the reasons feminism arose, was because people claimed that men were abusing their power. But that doesn't, and this is what you fight for as well, which is that just because that was done doesn't now mean that you erode masculinity completely.
Absolutely, and
So-
also it was
so I
a
would say
very
that,
small minority of men. I would argue that feminism is women abusing their power. I think feminism from day one was a female supremacist movement.
And Zarina, I would say the same for religion, that if you look at academics like Karen Armstrong, who've written books like Fields of Blood, she's said the same thing, that if you look at majority of the religious wars, they are actually based on politics and geopolitics. And that's where these differences and that's where these issues come from. People will weaponize that and they will claim to be attached to that, but upon closer inspection and analysis, you realize that no, it's not actually Islam that says that, it's not Christianity that says that, it's
people that use
people.
these religions and weaponize them for evil. Yes, I see.
So coming back to your point about the goddess, like what's your evidence that goddess exists?
Well, for me, because all ancient cultures used to worship goddesses, and for me this is very important, especially as a woman, because I think that one of the biggest problems with these same modern Abrahamic religions is a lack of goddesses and a lack of honoring the divine feminine. And this honoring of the goddess is, the goddess represents that feminine aspect, and I think the feminine aspect of the woman. And all ancient cultures had goddesses, statues of goddesses, and this idea of reverence for the woman and reverence for the divine feminine is important. And for me, this is where I gain a lot of my influence regarding being anti-feminism, because for me, this idea of women tapping into their divine feminine, of being feminine, is actually a very big spiritual underpinning with it, and I gain a lot of influence for that.
Would you say the Western woman is more feminine, or would you say Muslim women are more feminine in a holistic, general sense?
I mean, neither Western nor Muslim women really adhere to what I consider to be classic femininity, I would say.
Which is?
Well, when I think of femininity, I suppose for me the feminine ideal is this whole idea of, for example, no disrespect to either, but I do see kind of two extremes in a way. Like, for example, the woman wearing a burqa versus a woman being overly promiscuous. These two images of the woman, for me, represent what some women would dub the Madonna on the floor, or the good girl and the bad girl. And this is something that I do see that comes from the Abrahamic religions, especially Christianity. This idea of women are either good and chaste and virtuous, where you cover yourself, cover everything, or overly sexual and over the top. And for me, the resolution with that is the woman being the feminine, i.e., for me, someone who I've always viewed as a feminine ideal is Marilyn Monroe, because I know she's just like a person, but for me, Monroe represents that balance of a woman being, sexy and sensual, but also being, kind and gentle and feminine. Or even you could say the Disney princesses.
Okay, let's stick with your example. That's interesting. Let's break that down. You said Marilyn Monroe. First thing you said was sexy, yeah? So Marilyn Monroe, she would wear obviously skirts.
Yeah, she wore like, nice elegant
tight dresses, tight.
Elegant clothes.
Yeah, elegant, which was tight, which was revealing.
Not in the same way that someone like, say, Cardi B or
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So, but nevertheless, showing one's body.
What's wrong with that?
No, I'm just asking. Do you think that's part of?
I think that women are part of, maybe men don't really understand this, but women by nature want to feel attractive, because I think women by nature want to feel attractive and want to be attractive to men. And the thing is that when a woman is very, very attractive, that actually, I don't know how to explain this. If a woman being very attractive and very desirable increases her attractiveness and magnetism, meaning that if a man goes with her, if other men look at her as being very attractive, it actually makes him appear better. That's why you have the concept of the trophy wife, of, oh, my wife is very beautiful and desirable and other men are looking at her. But the fact that I now come as the man, meaning that I'm the man and I'm in charge, I'm the dominant one. So other men might look at her and find her desirable, but because I'm the man, they're not going to challenge me.
I got you.
Because a lot of, I know, like, for example, in Mad Men, you have this thing, you have these men who are, these very, like, dominant males, and they have attractive wives, but it's like, it's the whole thing of look but don't touch. And this is a very feminine thing. The desire, I kind of made a joke about it with Mr. Dawah about what if I want you to look at me, and I was joking, but the actual root I was trying to say is that women, part of being feminine, the feminine desire, is the desire to be perceived as attractive. Because, for example, if I was standing there at Speaker's Corner wearing a burqa or hijab, it would not generate the same levels of attention. There's actually a very psychological reason why.
Let's pin this down though. Let's pin this down. So you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, a portion or part of quality of femininity is showing one's body, yeah?
It's not showing one's body. What I mean is that the desire to be perceived as attractive to other people is a very, very important part of being a feminine woman. Most women like.
So you don't have to show your body.
Well, it's because show your body. It wouldn't, like, women. There's a reason why women wear certain clothes, like just the hourglass shape. Like, women want to have their body shown in a way, but it's like the feminine figure. Again, if you think of the goddess, like if you look at a lot of these goddesses, the way they dress, they wear certain clothes. It's that idea of looking at a woman in the reverence and the beauty. And I do think that pornography has actually really harmed this a lot, because pornography is.
What's wrong with pornography though?
Well, pornography has actually really harmed the way that a lot of men look at women, because instead of looking at the feminine body as being beautiful and wow, it's like reducing the woman's body down to like a commodity. So I think that's.
But then with Marilyn Monroe, she shows her arms and legs.
That's not the same as being.
No, but here's the thing though. Somebody showing her arms and legs, but somebody says, you know what, I just want to be in a bra and panties. Where do you draw the line?
Well, I think Marilyn Monroe was very good at dressing in a way that was elegant and classy and feminine. And I think the same would go for a lot of those Hollywood female icons like Rita Hayworth, and they would dress in a way that was very, very feminine and showing themselves. But
that's not what I asked though. I'm saying, where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Well, it's also about how it's done, because the way in which they were shown was, they're grown women. They were shown in a way that's very beautiful, but not necessarily in a way that was vulgar. There wasn't a vulgarity to the way in which.
How do we determine where that line of vulgarity begins?
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, I think that, I don't know, I suppose if I compare Gentlemen Prefer Blondes to a modern pornography film, the Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, you have, Marilyn and her co-star dressing in an elegant way, and then you have these modern pornography stars there's a big difference in like the modern porn stars are very trashy, you know.
We're getting more vague. So let's stick with your hourglass model skirt. Legs being shown, not trashy, yeah?
No, yeah.
The skirt comes higher, about up to here. That we're seeing little girls like 9-year-olds going and they're
See, that's a bit different, isn't it? Because Marilyn Monroe is a grown woman, she's not a little girl.
no problem 18-year-olds
Yeah,
or 20-year-olds.
18, yeah, that's
Hair, that's trashy.
I mean, yeah, it's a big discussion to be had for sure because, you know, a lot of women do genuinely, in school they say, you know, how long should be your skirt and all that, how much legs
What about you?
show.
What do you think? Because you're the one that's
The way
representing
I
this.
don't think it's wrong for women to show their legs at all. I do think, however,
That's
it
not what I'm
depends
asking,
on-
by the way, yeah?
I know, but I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
good for the beauty. I
Okay.
think it depends on where you're going, who you're going with. That's why, for example, a lot of women, say if a woman's going to a nightclub, she's much safer. That's why traditionally, you know, historically speaking, a woman would go with a man. It's like, oh, she's nice and people are looking at her, but if there's any trouble, I'm the man. I'm the one who's in control of the situation. So it's
So she can expose. So okay, this is interesting. So you're saying if she exposes a large part of her body, but she's going to a nightclub, you're saying that's all right because that's a place that's acceptable.
yeah, and also because if a man is there, then it's almost like if there's any problem, he's the one who can step in, kind of thing.
When you say if there's a problem, if a woman is sumptuous,
So if she receives, I don't know,
If she-
of
yeah.
attention.
if a woman is beautiful, let's just say a 9, yeah, she's got bits and bobs hanging out, yeah, in whatever capacity, I mean, you say that this is all right, that's not all right. Would you say that she's not going to receive attention?
Well, here's the interesting thing. If every man was out and if every man was out and every man had a woman who was dressed like that, it would change the dynamic, wouldn't it? Because suddenly it's like, well, we've all got an attractive woman on our arms, so it's almost like, yeah, okay, I might look, but it's like we've all got an attractive girl, so
But
a
then,
man is not going to be as likely. Whereas now we've got this modern
but
generation of
you're
incels.
assuming attractiveness is objective.
I think it is.
Palestine,
I
nigga.
think that attractiveness is based on averages. I know I've actually looked at this scientifically. They usually say that on women with, well, I'm saying women because women are, you know, more typically beautiful than men, in that rude way. But like, female beauty usually comes from averageness. So, for example, that's why women who are a certain shape.
That's
have
the
a certain
scientific
body
side.
face.
But when you look at
Sure.
certain people, based on, for example, certain parts of the globe that they're in, doesn't matter about a woman's face. If she's got her jugs out, with all due respect, a person's not going to be looking at her face. A person's going to be looking at her chest, and they're going to be all over her like a rash. So if we take the logic that you're saying, that if all women just lower the standards of showing their body, then it desensitizes, that's what you're saying, isn't it? It desensitizes the people to the lack of clothing and people can express their beauty. But what you're now doing is you're correlating a person's femininity and beauty with reduction of clothes.
No,
And
I
when
wasn't
you're-
saying that. What I was actually saying is that a big part of being a feminine woman is celebrating and highlighting female beauty, and a lot of women.
And you're correlating
I've
that,
always done that.
yeah, and you're correlating that with, but not specifying specifically to showing parts of the body or wearing tight clothes.
Well,
But
here's an
but here's the
interesting thing.
counter argument. Let me talk about this, yeah. If a woman is in a burqa and a person converses with her, if a person converses with her, respects her, and falls in love with her, as opposed to a woman that's got her big jugs out, that's, you know, waxed her legs, that's done all of that sort of stuff, and, you know, color coordinated and all of that, would I be unreasonable in assuming, generally speaking, that the man that's standing in front of a woman that's exposing her body, his falling for her isn't as pure as falling as the other man who fell for the one in the burqa?
It doesn't really make sense to me because one of the first things a man looks at is a woman's attraction, and it's like if a woman's wearing a burqa, then where's the sexual attraction?
That's where I said where it came from. The conversation and finding out who she is from what
Yeah, but
she's saying
that's
rather
like
than
a
what she looks for.
friendship. You know, you need to to fall for a woman, you do need to find her sexually desirable as well. That's where, like, again, if I go back to the Madonna Vulgarity dichotomy, it's actually unhealthy because that's where you end up. I was talking about this earlier, actually. A lot of men, prostitution was legalized because a lot of men were not having sex with their wives. And I think it's really unhealthy. If a man is married, and yeah, he's not sexually excited by his wife, and he feels the need to go to a prostitute, maybe that's a fault of society of trying to almost desexualize women, where you end up with women either being completely sexless, chaste, virginal women in workers, or women being these whores. And what I'm trying to say is, surely we should be trying to merge it together so a man has his wife and whore, for want of a better term, in one woman.
Today, the goat.
But coming back to the example that I gave, if a man is speaking to a woman with a burqa and then respects her and falls in love with her, any average person can say, you know what, that man is falling in love with her personality.
Why
And
do I need
just
to wear
to-
a burqa for a man to fall in love with my
Because that's the example that you used. I didn't use the burqa as an example. You brought it up, that's why I wanted to use your example for you. So with the burqa, if he's speaking to her and he falls in love, like I said, any average person can see, you know what, that person has fallen in love with her soul, with her asal, which means her essence. And that essence, because looks will fade. 10, 15 years, things will start sagging, person will get bored. But it's the personality, it's the spirituality, it's the depth behind the person that is more important. With the woman with the jugs, I'm telling you as a man, and I've got a lot of self-control. But if a woman that's a 9 out of 10 is standing in front of me with her bits and bobs dangling out, that's a big test
Yeah,
for me.
don't you think they're just two extremes?
They are, but those are the extremes that you brought up.
And I'm
Sorry.
saying that I think that we shouldn't
No.
have those.
I don't think that the burqa is an extreme.
I do.
But that's why I'm saying we can discuss that. But because you brought up those two examples, that's why I'm using those two examples.